Hey, this is Travis Gafford, the double lift expert, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
TSM has announced that they've added Zikz as their new head coach. Now, the timeline of this move was they demoted their previous coach, Song, in June, with Lost Boy taking over as the interim head coach. Song left this month in October, and Zikz was just added now. Now, the background for Zikz is he was the coach of CLG for the last 2 years as the head coach. Way before that, he'd worked as an analyst under Monte Cristo, so you're going all the way back to 2014. He was actually there even before then, but on a lower level, just doing some reports. You can see more about that in my interview with him. He worked under Skara when Skara was the coach, and he worked under Coach Chris, the guy who helped CLG finally lift the NALCS title and then go to Worlds for the first time in the LCS era. Now, he left the team, CLG, in this summer split. Apparently, he was fired, he was let go. He's someone who, interestingly enough, never won the Coach of the Split award, despite the fact, personally, if I'd have had a vote, I'd have voted for him at least once, if not twice. I thought at times, you go back to 2016, he looked like the best coach in the league, quite frankly, because I didn't think he was ever working with the best talents. The fact he was able to win championships, able to get to MSI final, I thought this was all pretty impressive stuff, all in all. So, one of the things, I haven't done a roster move video, I noticed, in League of Legends, so I haven't been able to explain my new formula that I use when I do CSGO roster moves, which is you look at the team that's making the main change, you ask if the person they remove was the right person to remove in isolation, then you look at who they're adding, you ask is that the right move to add, and then in the context of who you removed. So let's do it that way. So TSM, obviously a squad which ever since Season 6 onwards has been loaded with some of the very best talent that the Western regions have to offer, EU and NA. Season 5, Season 4, they're working with like some good pieces, some veteran pieces, some newer pieces, some just okay pieces. And that's one of the reasons why I think they actually gradually fell down as a team as the CLGs, the Cloud9s of the world tooled up with a lot more talent. And then you got more and more investment in the NALCS, spots being bought, and more people being imported from Korea, from Europe, etc. And it got much more competitive. But Season 6 onwards, they've been the best franchise overall. They've had a lot of success. Obviously, they've won 3 LCS titles in that space of time. They went to Worlds twice. They were at an MSI. This is a team that was very, very successful. But you come to Season 8, they dropped off massively. They were only able to make semi-finals once. They couldn't make a single final all year, and they didn't qualify for Worlds. They weren't able to win the gauntlet. So, is removing Song as a coach the right move? Well, first of all, the results don't match up to the standard that TSM expects. And I always say this, whether or not someone is a bad coach, ultimately, if you are playing for a big market team, if it's a traditional sport, if you're playing for a team with a history of winning, if you are playing for a team that has given you the pieces, the resources to win, and you don't win, and that was the expectation, that's the only realistic or expected goal for you, you have failed, and whether it was your fault or not, you probably need to move on, because either you identify the fault and you say it's this player here, or need this type of a player, in which case the org goes out and gets those players for you, and you as a coach are able to negotiate with the org and convince them, get them to buy into the idea it's not your fault. So someone like Reaper did a very successful job of that in Cloud9 despite not winning any LCS titles. But I think if you look at Song and the job he did here, I think it's the right move to remove him. Maybe he is a good coach, but if he wasn't a good coach for this group of players, in my opinion, or this particular Western team, or this style of team. So in that scenario, he can go and be a good coach elsewhere if he is indeed a coach. Let's bring in someone that fits TSM and fits the culture of their team. Now, personally, from the little I know outside, things I've heard from industry insiders, and things I've been able to glean, read in between the lines in interviews, I think it's fairly certain that removing him was the right approach anyway. First and foremost, he doesn't seem like an authority figure in the context of both what you think of as a Western authority figure, someone who can actually command the respect of players, not automatically be given it, and more importantly, for a team like TSM with this big level of expectation on you, massive pressure on all the players that you either have to alleviate or channel into greatness, only seeing the upside, and get them all on your page. And you've seen in TSM, the people who've succeeded generally are the ones who are a little bit more passive, took more of a backseat, gave some strategical input, gave like pick ban input, gave basic coaching to the team, ran the practices, but authority figures, they haven't had many of them. And unfortunately, I think Song was another in the list of poor hires in that sense of not being a true authority figure. I mean, in a sense, I don't blame him. He seems like a very Korean, as in he's a guy where I don't think he was going to be what you think of in a Western guy. Now, for anyone who's wondering, you just mentioned Reapid. Reapid was never particularly Korean in that sense anyway. He was already a very brash individual, a guy who was known for having bold opinions, and a guy who basically demands your respect. Otherwise, he's not going to respect, or he's not going to stay in your team, and you're going to get rid of him yourself. Hence why he went from Blaze, Deska, Telecom, Jeanette, etc. This is a guy who's a leader of men. He's very different from a lot of the typical Korean stereotypes that you would think of the coaches that I've seen over there, many of whom might even be analyst type figures, but still get the respect of their players and have a true head coach with this older age, maturity, leadership role who can take on that aspect and make sure people stay in line. If I had to speculate, I would imagine Song came over to the West from coaching those teams in Korea, Rocks Tigers as like a secondary coach, Longju, and he probably thought to himself, right, I'm on a top team now, right? I'm a top coach. I've got coaching experience. These players will respect me, right? They should respect me. I'm their coach. You know what? You can't expect that authority. It might come in Korea. That might be the cultural way it works. You might get a certain level of obedience by default, and you might get people doing what you say, no matter what, if you're a coach in Korea in an established org who has been sort of vouched for by the org itself, by being put in that position. That's part of the culture they have over there that gives them actually, I think, a natural advantage. Obviously, it's not natural to have culture. That is artificial. But in terms of like, it already exists within their culture to create that space that a coach could step into, the same space a boss would be in, a teacher would be in, and their hierarchies are much more strictly defined over there. Then you got to add in, not only in that sense, though, I think he was a mismatch with TSM, but more importantly, they didn't have any Korean players. So it's not like he had a Korean player he could coach, or he could be like a shoulder for, or he could get motivated and get on the right page, or they could bring in some amazing Korean player who could play one spot that they're not as good at the moment. He didn't even have that advantage going for him. So quite frankly, I think he ended up overhyped because of his one split with Immortals in terms of how he performed there. But like, I didn't think that was necessarily him doing anything amazing. A lot of it looked like Cody's son improved a lot after being a rookie. Ole really turned his game around and figured out how to play in that team. Flame was in the meta where he could play bruisers and carries top. Paul Belter was already a very solid player. X-Smithy's a fantastic team juggler. I'm not sure how much of that was Song, quite frankly. I'd love to hear from the players. Maybe they have some interesting stories. But anyway, that's also a very different group of players and an org with very different expectations than TSM. There's not the same pressure playing for Immortals as there is for TSM. If you'd have played for Immortals and made semis and done and had a good game, people would say, oh, great job, great coaching. If you play for TSM and you make finals and lose, people are going to say, should this motherfucker's head roll? Who do we have to get in here to win this title and go to Worlds and have a bigger result? Especially now in an era where all these other teams have made their moves and they're actually making time. I mean, one of Fnatic and Cloud9 is going to be in the finals of Worlds, something TSM has never come close to accomplishing. So I actually think not only was he overhyped due to his time with Immortals, but then you add in, he had his association with the Rock Tigers, who were a fantastic team and seemed to be a very well-coached team, although obviously No Fear was the head coach there. He was just a member of the coaching staff. As far as I can tell, I would guess Song is more of the analyst type of coach, not a head coach in the traditional sense. As you can see by the way I've emphasized this element, I think TSM needs an authority figure. They need someone who can take the basic culture that Reginald has developed within the team, which I think is a big reason why they've been successful. In many ways, he has been the Bill Belichick, the Red, what was he called? Red Auerbach or whatever, of League of Legends in NALCS, and made a great culture that has been about winning, excellence, and cutting the players who can't win and don't have the right attitude. I think that's been a great thing. But they need someone who can take that baton and do it themselves as a coach. Reginald's not the appropriate person to do that in Season 8. You could argue from about Season 5 onwards, he wasn't particularly, quite frankly. So they need someone who can be an authority figure, enforce the culture, maintain it, build it with their own flavour, and make the players in TSM believe they can win. Not be weighed down rather by all the pressure, but be buoyed up by the concept of like, you get to play for a legendary org here. We're going to do special things here. Of course there's pressure because you guys are champions. Now go out there and take what's your... That's the kind of person I want, not the sort of soft-spoken guy. Yeah, we're going to do these things. Good job, guys. Like, that ain't the sort of guy. And so they've had a lot of coaches like that. Some people even a path, I wasn't supposed to be coach. Well, you still end up doing it, didn't you? So for me, those sorts of people weren't the right fit overall. Then I actually like the fact that this season, despite the poor results, I think they still took a step in the right direction by having Reginald delegate this coaching role Because I thought that actually was an issue in the past when he would step in and he would take over. And yes, it'd get them the LCS finals. Yes, it'd win them some extra titles. Yes, it might even have gotten them to Worlds a few times when they hadn't. But I think in the short term, winning that battle lost him the ultimate war, which is that he didn't get the right coaching staff to develop his players the most and make the best chemistry, which would have made you a better team when you got to Worlds. Whereas actually, I think Reaper over on Cloud9 did a much better job in that sense of coaching more the macro style, coaching more the fundamentals, and therefore when his teams went to Worlds, they performed better than TSM, even if they didn't perform better when they were back home. Well, until Season 8 at least. Now, I think also part of being that authority figure involves how you interact with Reginald. To stop him from wanting to step in, to stop him from firing you earlier, to stop him from siding with a player over you, you've got to be someone who can stand up to Reginald too, win his respect over, command his respect, make him believe in your message, buy into that, then you can go forwards. Because as I say, I think historically that has been a massive failing of the coaches and to some degree Reginald in terms of who he hired. Because I think if you look at Reginald's personality, he's hired people who were too much convinced that they had to tell Reginald what he wanted to hear. Or they were just more beta, more passive individuals themselves, because that's the kind of players that Reginald tended to surround himself with when he was a player. So I think it's just the natural way of things. And now that you look into it, you've got to reflect and ask that. So I think Song being removed, the right move. Now, is adding Zikz the right move in itself as a separate move? These are two separate moves. And then there's the overall impact. This is a really complicated one, because if we just want to talk game-wise, what he can do in the game in terms of how he's going to coach these players, I think this is a guy who could accomplish a lot here. He's a team who, every team I've seen him coach, as in all the different iterations of CLG, until the last one, where I thought they had very poor players in Season 8, I thought always had pretty legit macro. Always had a chance to beat teams that were better than them, that actually had overbearing laners, better individual players overall, better carries. They haven't had very many carries for the Zikz era, actually, that I thought were very legit. But he got some very good results out of that, some very legit results, some really nice performances, won the LCS, went to the finals of MSI. So that is legit shit. And you look at those teams and they're doing it from really nice macro, very solid fundamentals. Now, I will say as a caveat, sure, he had Afro move before him. Someone who has shown that kind of a strength, that kind of a shot calling strength and macro strength, even when he isn't in this team, when he's been over on 100 Thieves now. So if he can bring that to TSM, that could help TSM immensely in the game. Because they have, at the moment, very good players. They have had very good players in Season 6, Season 7. But quite frankly, they were never properly tested in terms of macro because they had such fabulous individual players. Many of them self-directed. Will just carry, will just dominate lane, will just play their own game themselves. Don't have to be coached as much. And so I always thought they lacked a little bit for the kind of true chemistry that comes to where you have the grit to do insane comebacks against teams who are better players than you. You don't have to brute force your way out of it and beat people individually. That's one of the things where I thought they were too good in terms of players and the base of people they had together domestically to properly get tested so they could go internationally and show how good they were. To some degree, you could say the same thing about Team Liquid. Now, Team Liquid looked like they had pretty good macro in NA, but again, they had such good players and at so many positions. Were they really tested enough? I don't know that they were, which is why it makes sense to me to some degree that they were underwhelming when they went international. Now, I'll also add in all those CLG lineups that Zikz was a part of as the head coach seem to also have both very legit comms. They seem like they really communicated well in terms of what they wanted to do and between the lanes, and then also they had pretty good chemistry as far as I can tell until the last one of Season 8. I thought even the ones in Season 7, which weren't always that good, still had legit qualities to them. The authority issue, which I've already emphasized and outlined, is where I have a problem here, because Zikz as a person, from seeing him in interviews, from talking to him, from interviewing him myself, from hearing things about him in the industry, doesn't actually seem like that type of an authority figure coach, quite frankly. He seems more like a really good analyst, a really good coordinator, if you want to use like the offensive, defensive coordinator logic of an NFL team, where that guy knows exactly what he wants to do on offense or defense and can manage some elements of that, but he needs the head coach to keep it all in line, and he needs them to pull it all together, and also to veto some of his ideas that might not fit that particular team. That's where I could see an issue, because unlike CLG under Zikz, where he had all these underpowered players at times, which people are already going to take and say, she's in them all underpowered shit, like, whatever, mate, see you in a future Thorin versus Reddit episode. I actually think that one of the things that might have been a positive for him in working with those talents that weren't necessarily the biggest names or biggest egos is that they didn't need the same authority figure. They were already on board. They were cool guys. They were chill guys. Once you got rid of the Doublelifts of the world, they were happy that we could all be on the same page and do the same thing. We don't have anyone being mean or shouting at us or expecting too much of us. That ain't going to be the case in TSM. You've got big personalities, which doesn't mean they're toxic or arseholes, but they're people who have their own opinion and a very well-informed, rounded opinion for their role and some team aspects like Bjergsen, like Mithy, to some degree even like Sven, who they're going to want you to convince them that what you're saying is right, that you can lead them. You have to lead them there. You can't just say, just go there. You have to lead the way and they will follow. That's the sort of mentality that you're going to need, I think, if you're going to be a successful head coach at TSM and take TSM further than they've been in the past. So I have to say as well, I'm not buying the idea, quite frankly, that Zikz is the kind of coach that could stand up to Reginald or hold his own with him entirely. I don't know that he necessarily did that within CLG. If he did, then did he really want these players? If he did, I guess maybe he's not actually a very good GM in that sense for Season 7, Season 8. If he didn't, and they were forced on him, was he not able to convince the management? Again, I actually count convincing management and other people and getting them on board with your vision as a way of manifesting and showing that you have the ability to do it for players and people beneath you in the hierarchy. That's another aspect of charisma, of being a head coach, of having authority, in my particular idiosyncratic opinion on this topic. Now, I will say one of the reasons that also ties into why I'm not sure he'll be able to stand up to Reginald is that comment he made in the now leaked chat where he basically said to Afromu that it seems like cancer working for TSM. I can see what he means. Yes, the level of fan expectation, the amount that you're going to be on the chopping block, how difficult it might be, the fact that you could literally get sort of fucking cocked and the guy just come in and take your role out from off and say, you're not even going to finish this play, actually. I'm coaching now. Take over, go to the fans, and then all the fans will go, oh, thank you, Reggie, for saving us. That guy really shouldn't be the coach or believe everything they see on reality shows. It's a lot of fucking pressure. But you know what? If you're a winner and you're someone who really does believe in what you're doing and that you have a strong skill set, then you should embrace that pressure and go, good, I want the pressure because I want to be a legend coaching for the Lakers or the Patriots or the Dallas Cowboys or whoever it is. I want to take that pressure because that pressure comes with the chance to be great, to do something amazing. Is Zikz that guy? I don't know. Sometimes I felt as though he was a guy who would settle for like, well, my players played well and I coached as well as I could and we didn't win this time, but we'll improve and we'll come back next time. I don't know that that is going to fly around TSM, and I definitely don't think that's the sort of mentality that Reginald's after. So that's where I have my concerns. I'm not saying it can't work. This is just outside speculation and concerns. Then you've got to add in TSM, especially this TSM, is a very different team to the CLG teams that Zikz was coaching. Like, even his CLG team of 2016 that won LCS and went to the finals of MSI were underdogs. It was a surprise that they won LCS. It was a surprise that they did so well at MSI. Not least because of the roster. They didn't often have massive talented players. By all accounts, they had a very chill, respectful group. So I don't know that he's been tested in that respect beyond his short time with Dardoch, which didn't last very long. There's a concept that we have in European sports. I know it exists in traditional sports in America as well, but it's a little bit different. In European sports, where we have these big leagues, we call it big manager or big club manager and small club manager. Small club manager, you get him if you're in relegation, you want to avoid relegation. You get him if you're like the 15th best team and you want to become the 7th best team and challenge for a European spot in the English Premier League. Big club manager is a guy who can take all the pressure. He can take all the scrutiny. He knows he must win. He must be in the top of the league. He must be contending and probably win the championship. Else he is out of there. He is fired and he embraces that because that's who he is. He's got a big personality. He's got a big skill set. And so it's the right job for him. In sports, in traditional sports in America, you'd maybe compare it to big market coach, small market coach. If you're a coach of the Indiana Pacers, to some degree, you can get away without your team being a contender for the NBA every season. If you're a coach of the Knicks, the Lakers, people are going to expect your team is great or you will get massive scrutiny and people will call for your head. So in this setting, I'm sorry, at the moment, I would in his career characterize Zikz as a small market, small club manager who does very well given a little bit and probably better than he should do with what he's given. Now, I hope he can prove me wrong. Wouldn't that be cool? Maybe we find a new level of depth to him, something that we haven't been able to witness because he didn't get the chance to before. But he's now dealing with a very different team. He's now dealing with those big ego players who they know how to play the game. And so if what you think counteracts what they do or you want them to play a different way and you can't get them on board, they aren't going to be too happy with that. So can he match that? Can he match the huge expectations? I saw he had issues dealing with Dardoch, who, by the way, after that, where did he go? Oh, He only went over eventually and ended up on this Echo Fox team where he looks like one of the MVPs of the fucking league. So I always said it won't be just the case of DoubleG maturing as a person. Someone's going to help him along, accelerate that maturity. And as I've always said, whoever did that will win the NA lottery by having a domestic jungler who's as good as anyone in the league. And yes, Echo Fox, the rest of their team isn't that good, but DoubleG's there. CLG could have been the team who did that. And if they'd have done that and it had worked, such a proactive, strong ganking jungler, that could have again revitalized their squad and given them a new sort of second age of contending for LCS titles. Instead, they had some good success with DoubleG initially. Sure, they looked like they were limiting how he was playing, and then he had to be shipped out of there, and it's been quite shit ever since, quite frankly. So that gives me my question marks about working with a big ego. Sure, DoubleG's a pretty extreme example, but some of these guys aren't always the sort of like easiest walk in the park, mate. Can this guy handle the pressure of both being at TSM, their fans' expectations, and being there with Reginald? That's a question he'll have to answer. Then there's the issue with roles. You look at some of the things they did in CLG. They brought in Rainover. I don't know why. Rainover should have been on a team where he's there to service everyone. I think, in fact, TSM's the sort of team Rainover should have been on. I don't know why they got that sort of a player on a team where, for my money, a Rainover isn't going to be the sort of player you want for that. Like, he isn't going to be able to do that much for you. So was he involved with bringing Rain over? Did he want Rain over? If so, it seems a bit misguided. And in a team that has massive jungle issues for many years now, that ain't a great sign if you can't make a read of what sort of jungle you want. Then you consider, did he choose not to upgrade key positions over the years because he was fine with them? If so, he must accept the results that they did not place well. If he wasn't, then was he not able to convince the CLG to give him big signings? In which case, okay, maybe he can in TSM. And quite frankly, in TSM, aside from jungler, does he really need to? He's probably got them already. Now, in terms of TSM, they still have potentially a very bright future. They have such good pieces on their squad. If you bring in a guy who can coach macro properly and on an international level, as Zikz has shown he's been able to, now maybe you can unlock more of that potential and be an amazing squad. Forget winning LCS. You could already do that with this roster. I'm talking about go to Worlds and have the big results. Go to MSI and have the big results. That's the exciting part. I still think the jungler issue needs to be solved. Like, I'm not buying the idea all these rookies they get are quite frankly ever going to become good. I look at them play. They have a few good games. People go out of their way to praise them because they're so desperate for jungle talent. But then you look at them overall, they're nowhere close to top junglers in the LCS while they play for TSM. None of them ever are, seemingly. Then you look at all these rookie junglers they've tried. Mike Young, I'm not really rookie, but in terms of very young player, Greg. These guys, it's so rare that these guys ever make it. I mean, look at some of the other people that came in. Everyone was raving about them. Contracts, Acadian, Mike Young. Where the fuck are these guys now? Exactly. They either washed out the league, they're in the bottom of the league. No one's talking about them as being really strong players. Except for DoubleG, no one really made it out of that group. Moon to some degree did. Even then, a lot of people would probably say it hasn't quite lived up to the potential that they hoped for him there. So, fuck all that. You're TSM. Just go get an established jungler of the style you want. Team style jungler. You could have had Xmithy in the past. I would have gone for someone like Ameteos, even though he has a big ego. There's plenty of players out there. There's European players you could go and try and get. Dave Max or a fucking blank check. There's plenty of players out there. So I hope the TSM future has a lot of positives surrounding it. Zikz, I think, has some positives in terms of what he can bring. I'm very uncertain about some other aspects. And going forwards, I think that's the aspect of the whole culture puzzle that no one's really figured out yet on TSM. And once they figure that out, that's when the international results come, in my opinion. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out, as always, to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? We'll put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.